Welcome to the Book of Mormon Evidence podcast with host Rod Meldrum. This week's Come Follow Me supplemental study is Lesson 36, 3rd Nephi 1-7. Lift up your head and be of good cheer. Rod's guest on this podcast is James T. Prout, the author of the book The Last Days Timeline. He's an expert on the specific Last Days events and the founder of lastdaystimeline.com. Find out how you can prepare your family for the next events in the sequence. Prophecy is simply the future shown to the prophets of God in advance. Why not help your family by showing the signs of the times before they happen? James has spent 20 years studying the scriptures and other authors. He pulls out the nuggets of truth and cuts through the clutter that has been recorded surrounding prophecy of the end times leading to the second coming of Jesus Christ. Let him help you discover the next domino to fall so you can prepare your family for the next event in the sequence.
Hey, everybody. Welcome to another podcast edition of the Come Follow Me series with the Book of Mormon Evidence group here. And we're basically, this is the manual again that we're using here. This week, we're actually going to be talking about the beginning of 3rd Nephi. So this is 3rd Nephi chapters 1-7, and I have with me my friend James T. Prout is with us.
Howdy.
You saw him a couple of weeks ago talking about Ezra's eagle, and there's things about Ezra's eagle that also apply amazingly here through 3rd Nephi, and so we're going to go into that.
We're back,
folks. I hope you're ready to strap in because this is going to be a pretty interesting. I think you're going to enjoy this information. And again, just for information's sake, we are using the annotated edition of the Book of Mormon as our primary source material, to reference to. But we also here, James Prout has this. He has the Last Days Timeline. This is Volume 2. This is Volume 1 right here.
Volume 1, Volume 2.
If you want to know additional information, which you're going to want to, but when you get done with this, you're going to want to dive into this and have a deep dive because of all the things that have been happening in our nation the last couple of months here. So let's go ahead and get started here with 3rd Nephi. This is going to be chapter 1 and verse 1. We start off basically at the 91st year of the reign of the judges. And this is 600 years from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem. And it was the year that Laconius, who was the chief judge and the governor over the land. We're going to talk a lot about this Laconius. And it says, and Nephi, the son of Helaman, had departed out of the land of Zarahemla. This is the Nephi that we've been talking to up until this point, basically. And he basically left and departed out of the land, and
he doesn't
disappear.
Appear again. He vanishes.
He's gone. We don't know what happened to him.
The record doesn't say, but since nobody ever heard from him again, we can most likely assume he was translated just like Elma the Younger, just like Moses, and so forth.
Yep. And this is now where we start to go into the fulfillment of Samuel the Lamanites' prophecies here. So this is in verse 5. But there were some who began to say that the time was past for the words to be fulfilled, which were spoken by Samuel the Lamanite. And so this is the hard part about making predictions. See.
Oh yeah.
There's a prediction.
I always assume I'm wrong. So,
if it doesn't come true, then you get in trouble, right?
Yeah.
So that's the reason why James here he doesn't make hard predictions, but you can see kind of where we're at. Interestingly enough, it does say in the scriptures that those who are seeking or looking for the signs will be able to see them. I mean, so it won't take you as a thief in the night.
Yeah.
So there's nothing wrong with looking for the things that are going to be happening,
and we're actually commanded.
That's right.
In Scripture and in the Doctrine and Covenants, a recommend to study the things which are yet to come, which means that we are to do it.
That's right. Exactly. So let's go ahead and this is one that really, as a child, I remember as my family would be reading the Book of Mormon. This one really was personal to me. I mean, I had a real feeling of what it would be like, basically, to be these people. So here we have Samuel the Lamanite. Everybody's like, okay, he's going to be, he just prophesied about this stuff. And then, so these predictions are made. And instead of just waiting to see, okay, let's just see what happens. I mean, they gather up these people and say, do you believe in this prophecy? Do you believe in this, Samuel? And if you said yes, okay, then tell you what, if it doesn't happen by this date that Samuel said,
put you to death.
Then you're going to give your life for this.
Yep.
I mean, how many of us would be willing to or ready to do that based on the prophecy of a prophet? I mean, you'd have to have a pretty strong understanding. You'd have to have a pretty strong witness in your heart that, number one, this guy was a prophet, and number two, that he had it right.
See, I look at that same sequence, and I see that I see where you're coming from. I look at it like, what kind of governmental power would be needed to make such a bad situation come to pass? Because that power doesn't exist today, not where we are now.
You can't just round people up and start killing them.
Right, you can't do that
because of a prophecy.
Right, you can't do that. But in the future, that sort of power seems to be able to come to pass, especially under the whore church as it rides the fourth beast kingdom. We're not going to get into that prophecy in these type of chapters here, but that sort of power seems to be available in the future, unfortunately.
Wow. You want to go into any more detail about that at this
No,
point?
because that would be a whole nother hour of different things.
Okay. All right. So it says in verse 9, now it came to pass that there was a day set apart by the unbelievers, that all those who believed in those traditions should be put to death, except the signs should come to pass, which had been given by Samuel the prophet.
Yep.
So they gathered them up, and apparently they have them all in one place there. And then verse 10, now it came to pass that when Nephi, the son of Nephi, saw this wickedness of his people, his heart was exceedingly sorrowful. And it came to pass that he went out and bowed himself down upon the earth and cried mightily to his God in behalf of his people. He wasn't praying for himself and his own deliverance. He was praying for the people.
And tomorrow's
those
the
who
day.
were about to be destroyed because of their faith in the tradition of their fathers. And it came to pass that he cried mightily unto the Lord all day, and behold, the voice of the Lord came unto him, saying, Lift up your head and be of good cheer, for behold, the time is at hand, and on this night shall the sign be given. And then in the end of verse 14, he says, And this night shall the sign be given. So he basically is reiterating twice, okay, I got your back. Going to happen tonight. And so I'm sure he goes and then shares it with the other people who were all basically waiting for their execution.
I love this
in the morning.
Yeah, it's right. I was just thinking. I love this part right here. It says, "On the morrow," right in 13 there. On the morrow, come I into the world.
Yeah.
Now, think about that for a second. If Jesus is being born, because come I into the world, and Jesus is being born the very next day, that would be Jesus' spirit saying this right before he takes his physical body. One day before he takes his physical body.
Yeah. That is an interesting aspect, isn't
That
it?
has some very heavy-duty implications. I don't know if he's special in that way, but that has some very heavy-duty implications.
Yeah. Yes, it does.
Yeah.
As to when the spirit enters the body?
Right, that
yes.
implication. Yeah, I can't
Yes.
answer that question for everybody, but this is a scripture you could point to say, there it is.
Yeah. And it said, Behold, I come unto my own to fulfill all things which I have made known unto the children of men from the foundation of the world, and to do the will both of the Father and of the Son, of the Father because of me, and of the Son because of my flesh. Behold, the time is at hand.
Coming tomorrow.
So then basically when the sun went down, it didn't get dark.
Oh.
But apparently they actually could see the sun going down, so they knew the sun was now down.
But there was another light source.
But it wasn't like the sun was just standing, as it were, in the there in the sky.
There was a different light
It went
source.
down and it came back up the next morning, and there was no darkness in between. So it was a different light source happening,
Yep.
which may have been the same light source that was being seen over in Jerusalem at the time.
Possibly.
Which was the indication of the star of Christ's birth.
Mm-hmm.
So,
That would be the assumption.
yeah.
And we really don't know. It's
Exactly.
happened 2,000 years ago. I wasn't there.
Yep, that's right.
I couldn't measure it with my instruments or anything. So.
Yep. And we don't know if it was exactly the
Well, I
same
wasn't there in the
brightness as the
flesh.
sun. I mean, it does say that it was the sign which they had been given was already at hand. There was no darkness when the night came. There was many who had not believed the prophets who fell on the earth, and it came as the dead. For they knew the great plan of destruction was laid for those who believed in the words of the prophets had been frustrated. In verse 10 it says, it came to pass that there was no darkness in all that night, and it was as light as though it was midday. So it was bright. It was not just a little thing. It was whatever this was. It was a big deal. And it came to pass that the sun did rise in the morning again according to its proper order. So that wasn't changed.
Nope.
And they actually called it, in verse 21, it came to pass also that a new star did appear according to the word.
There's the light source.
So if that may be the light source, or maybe that was the light source. But you wouldn't be able to see the star, basically, if there was something as bright as the sun out there.
Right, you'd have to
wait till the next night when you could actually see that, possibly. I don't know. And anyway, so then in verse 22, it came to pass that from that time forth there began to be lyings sent forth among the people by who?
Lucifer.
By Satan, and to harden their hearts to the intent that they might not believe in those signs and wonders which they had seen. So here we have Lucifer tries to get people to believe stuff, even when they've seen it with their own eyes, and somehow he weasels a way around to figure out how to make them disbelieve again in this, and not very much time frame. This was basically the 91st year of the reign of the judges is when we start, and this is basically in just before the 92nd year.
Here come the doubters.
So in less than a year's time, these people go, "Oh yeah, I saw the sign. I realized that it didn't get dark at night, which normally happens. Never happened before in our lifetimes, but there might have been a different explanation, maybe."
Mm-hmm.
So he says, then there were some people who said it was no more expedient to observe the laws of Moses.
Is that kind of like the explanation, like, I've never seen a dog turn into a cat?
Yeah. Yeah, kind of like that, yeah. so, yeah, because you haven't seen it doesn't mean it doesn't happen, right? Okay. All right, and then I love this where it talks about the one jot or tittle. This is at the bottom of page 380 of the annotated Book of Mormon. Basically the verse here, it says, but it came to pass that this is verse 25 of chapter 1, it came to pass that they soon became converted and were convinced of the error which they were in, for it was made known unto them that the Lord was not, that the law was not yet fulfilled. It must be fulfilled in every whit. They're talking about the law of Moses here.
Yep.
The word came unto them and that it must be fulfilled, yea, that one jot or tittle should not pass away until it should be all fulfilled. Therefore, in this same year were they brought to a knowledge of their error and did confess their fault. So they realized that, okay, the law of Moses is continuing on. The atonement has not happened yet. Christ has not done the atonement yet. He just was born, but he hasn't finished his work.
In other words, they're suffering from error and doctrine again.
Yes, exactly. But in the bottom of that, it says that it was no more expedient to observe the law of Moses, that the Nephites were observing the law of Moses as contained in the brass plates for over 600 years since they left Jerusalem. They were commanded to observe it until Jesus Christ's atonement fulfilled the law. The Hebrew word jot is the smallest letter of the square Hebrew alphabet. It's a tiny little character.
Yep.
And a tittle refers to a small stroke or point in writing or printing. Now, most of the time we kind of consider the dot and the I. Okay, as the B.
No, it's dot your I's, cross your T's.
That's right, exactly. But it's kind of an interesting little explanation of what that means, the jot and the tittle. And now the Gideon Wars begin. So you want to take it from there, or should we?
Oh, that's
go
fine.
through some of this.
That's okay. Let's talk about Laconius for a second here. Just for a brief overview, go back 2 weeks ago and look at Rod and I interview there with going over Ezra's Eagle. So we don't have to cover it all right now, right? So we can continue.
We're assuming you've already seen that. So
we're assuming you've seen that.
We're moving forward from that.
All right, so have a look at the slide there. When we get to that point, there we go. All right, this is Ezra's Eagle. You know what Ezra's Eagle is. You've seen it. You've seen that these feathers were linked to the U.S. presidents, right? You've seen this. All the 14 feathers, you've seen this. You've seen also the Mike Pence and Donald Trump feather. You've seen this. Now, what we're talking about here is the last 4 and 5 and 6 feathers over there at the very end of the kingdom, if you will. Now, Ezra's eagle doesn't overlap with Helaman and 3rd Nephi here in the Book of Mormon. So what you're seeing here is you're talking about feather number 5, Laconius, okay? And in the overlap part of it. And as you look at this, you'll see that they start out on the good side. This is Ezra's eagle says that there's only 2 feathers left before the end of the eagle kingdom. Book of Mormon says there's 2 Book of Mormon judges left before the end of the Nephite kingdom. And that's the overlay to look at ultimately. And in Ezra's eagle, the problem, the ending of Ezra's eagle has a new character come on the scene called the Lion.
It's a pretty scary looking eagle.
Yeah, it's a messed up.
He's thrashed.
At this point, the eagle's messed up. The left head killed the middle head, the right head killed the left head, and they're all very destroyed at this point. And then the lion comes upon it at the end to finish it off. And so we're looking at the finishing off of Ezra's eagle kingdom and the Book of Mormon kingdom here, and also the end of America, the last feathers or presidents in American history, future history.
Yeah. So this is when Christ basically comes in and takes down what's left of the Nephite government.
Yep.
For 200 years during that time frame, or in this particular case, it's be Christ coming in and taking down the American government because or America as we know it today, anyway.
Yep.
Because of the fact that you have during the millennium, Christ is going to reign personally upon the earth.
Yep.
He will be the King of Kings and Lord of Lords.
However, we're not talking about the millennium yet.
Yeah, we're not
that's
talking that there.
Yet, even future beyond this story.
Yes.
So the story we're going to cover here in 3rd Nephi, going up to the destruction, is the story of these last 2 little short feathers, or leaders of the Nephite kingdom, if you will, before the destruction, including Laconius.
Okay, now before you get into too much more detail about this, let me kind of just take just a couple minutes and share with you some interesting geography stuff that may go along with this as well, okay? Because basically what you have is essentially you have the Nephites are in essentially Zarahemla and the Land Bountiful area. That's the kind of the 2 main places, which is basically around Nauvoo area and up and down the Mississippi River and up and down the Ohio River as far as the Bountiful area. So the Gideon robbers basically are now getting so big and so strong. There's peace in the land. Verse 27, there's peace in the land. This is the 93rd year. But they began so powerful that the people could not overpower them.
Yep.
So now they were literally starting to take over their lands. And the 94th year came and went. In verse 29, there was also a cause of much sorrow among the Lamanites, for behold, they had many children who did grow up and did wax strong in years, and they became for themselves. I guess they reached a maturity or adulthood, and were led away by some who were Zoramites, again Nephite dissenters, by their lying and their flattering words to join those Gideon robbers, and thus were the Lamanites afflicted also, and began to decrease as to their faith and righteousness. And why? Because of the wickedness of the rising generation.
There's too many lies in society. They didn't believe the source of truth that was coming from their parents.
Yeah. And and also we don't know if their parents were really being great parents. I mean, maybe they were not teaching their children properly, letting them kind of skate, and not teaching them the principles that were going to help govern them in the future, and so they were losing it. Maybe Satan got a hold of their education systems.
At this phase of the Book of Mormon and at that phase in American history in the future, I do not know. Wow.
Anyway, speculation, but nevertheless. Then we get into chapter 2. Came to pass that thus passed away the 95th year also, and they forgot those signs and wonders which they had heard, and began to be less and less astonished at a sign or a wonder from heaven. Apparently there was signs and signs and signs happening, probably like blood moons and who knows, maybe solar eclipses and so forth. And there had been so many signs. It's like, this is no big deal. It just happens. It's just nature.
Yep.
And so they kind of are not really paying attention to that anymore.
In other words, Here's another interesting thing about this chapter. I've read this several times, and my scriptures are very noted right here. One reason why people, like you and I at home, right? One reason why people don't understand the prophecies of the future is because they're not meant to be understood until they're closer to you, right? Right now, we're living in the third beast kingdom. The fourth beast kingdom has not arrived yet. Therefore, the stuff is not close to us yet. When it gets close to us, you can't miss these signs. If you're looking at all, or you've read the Book of Mormon at all, you are going to know exactly where you are because you say, that looks familiar, and that looks familiar, and I've heard this before. Yeah. And you won't, believe me, you won't be able to miss it. It's going to be so evident. And it will strengthen your faith in God and his timeline of his prophecies when you know.
Yeah. But for the rest of the world, the other 99%, they're not going to have a clue.
Nope.
Now I will say that a lot of Christian people, they're looking for the signs almost more than we find a lot of members of the church looking for the signs. And they're seeing a lot of these things coming on, and they're trying to prepare for things. But let me just kind of go to a couple of things. But
the problem lays is that when you only have roughly 1/3 of the scriptures, you can't see everything with clarity. When you have, as Latter-day Saints do, the amount of scriptures that we have, you can have a much greater view as to the future than anybody else on planet Earth.
Yeah, exactly. So that's the big advantage that we have with having the scripture. So in verse, this is chapter 2, and from verses about 4 and 5 and 6, I mean, you're going through the 96th, the 97th, 98th, 99th, the 100th year. So now this has been 609 years since Lehi left Jerusalem. And 9 years have passed away from the time when the sign was given. So now they're starting to forget about the sign. This is the sign of Samuel. And the Nephites began to reckon their time. Oh, by the way, this is interesting. The sign of Samuel was apparently so profound that they kind of ended counting the reign of the judges and began counting from the sign of from that sign.
They get a new calendar system.
Yeah, because it was such an astounding thing that it actually did happen. And it proved that they were right. So they actually decided to go ahead and change their calendar system so that they began to reckon their time from this period when the sign was given, and from the coming or basically the birth of Christ.
Which ironically, in the Western world under Rome, they also not the exact same moment, of course, changed their calendar, but they eventually changed their calendar to hit the exact same date of Christ's birth.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So now, about 3 years later, from the end of the 9th year to the beginning of the 13th year, verse 11, and it came to pass in the 13th year there began to be wars and contentions throughout all the land. The Gideon robbers become so numerous, did slay many of the people, did lay waste to many cities, did spread so much death and carnage throughout the land that it became expedient that all the people, both the Nephites and the Lamanites, should take up arms against them. Therefore all the Lamanites who had been converted unto the Lord did unite with their brethren the Nephites. So it doesn't sound like it's all of the Lamanites in all of the lands. This is just like those who had been, like I said, the people of Ammon and so forth were there, and they were joining up. They were compelled for their safety of their lives and their women and their children to take up arms against those Gideon robbers. Now, by this point in time, I would guess that probably most of the people who had originally taken the oath not to fight had died off by now. So this was the 2,000 warriors and so forth, and and other kids and so forth now.
Yeah, we're talking 40 years ago.
Yeah,
at this point,
and their average life expectancy was probably around 50, 60 years, or maybe even less than that. So most of those people who had taken the oath were now gone. And it came to pass that before this 13th year had passed away, the Nephites were threatened with utter destruction. Dang, this has gotten really seriously bad. Very sore. Verse 15. Let's see. And it came to pass that those Lamanites who had united with the Nephites were numbered among the Nephites, and their curse was taken from them, and their skin became white like unto the Nephites, and their young men and young daughters were exceedingly fair, and they were numbered among the Nephites and were called Nephites, and thus ended the 13th year. Okay, so there we go.
Miracle. I don't know how that works.
Yeah. It's just a minor DNA tweak, really, for skin coloration. It's not that big of a deal. Okay. And in the 15th year, they did come forth against the people of Nephi. This is verse 18. And because of the wickedness of the people of Nephi and their many contentions and dissensions, the Gideon robbers did gain many advantages over them. So this sounds to me like the people themselves were fighting among each other. Mm-hmm. And that was distracting them from the real enemy, which was the Gideons. And then they have the real enemy, which was the overall Lamanites. And they're completely distracted with all these contentions and all this kind of stuff. Is that possible that could happen here in the United States?
Well,
these contentions like this and being distracted.
Yes, but not right now.
Yeah. Okay.
Right now, we're looking at like
of
a lineup, this is just a warm up. What we're seeing in 2020 is just a warm up for what will happen in the future. This is just a minor thing compared to what this type of thing is describing, and what the ultimate destruction of taking America out of the fourth beast will be like. Yeah, this is just a warm up.
Okay, and so this is in chapter 3 is where the Governor Laconius gets an epistle. Basically, I would call it a demand letter.
Yeah, demand letter.
Okay, from Gideon High.
Yeah.
And basically, what does he say? He basically says, you have verse 3, and it seemeth a pity unto me, most noble Laconius. I love the sacrosanct thing that's going on there. That ye should be so foolish and vain as to suppose that ye can stand against so many brave men who are at my command. This guy's got some he's thinking that he can really do this.
Well, at this point, they probably could until Laconius makes another move to strengthen his position.
Yep. He says these people do stand at this time in their arms and do await with great anxiety for the word, go down unto the Nephites and destroy them. I mean, he's pretty full of himself here. And I, knowing of their unconquerable spirit, having proved them in the field of battle, and knowing of their everlasting hatred towards you because of the many wrongs which ye have done unto them, therefore, if ye should come down against you, we're going to wipe you out.
What kind of wrongs are we talking about here?
Oh, these people have been wronged over. I mean, the Nephites went out there and were beating them up all the time and calling them names. And
are we talking about are we talking about a 600-year-old grudge war here? This is a 600.
These people have never experienced this.
Right. These people who are living at this time did not experience what Laman and Lemuel and Nephi had happened to them back then about stealing they said they would steal the records. They said this over in, I believe it's in Elma, that they stole their birthright to kingship. They stole the plates, which Laman and Lemuel wouldn't have anything to do with them anyway. They didn't care. Yeah. They stole the sword of Laban. They stole the Leahona. They stole whatever, and then took off and did their own thing. And then the noble Lamanites, or at least the Gideon robbers in this case, are trying to reunite the entire kingdom together. This sounds a lot like North Korea and South Korea. Mm-hmm. Not that they stole so much, but that they, separated themselves. And North Korea just keeps wanting to bring it all back under the same roof. But it's not a good roof. It's an evil roof. Yeah. It's a communism roof. And this letter is all about communism by force, not socialism by vote, but no, communism by force.
You can also look at it in the same fashion that the Lamanites felt that they were wronged many years ago, but none of them had actually experienced that. No. The same kind of thing goes with some of the with the Black Lives Matter movement and so forth, and they feel like they were wronged because there was slavery, but none of them have ever experienced any form of slavery. The ones that were really causing all the ruckus and so forth.
That is an interesting parallel.
Yeah, and so they haven't experienced it either.
A slight or wrong that is purported but
never experienced.
By
them. In fact, Laconius.
No, we're not
actually talks.
I'm not saying we're not saying that that all people have not experienced racism. That's not what we're saying. But in this letter, they're obviously not on the level with their own people. But their leaders aren't.
Yeah, exactly. Verse 6, it says, therefore I write unto you, desiring that you would yield up this, my people, your cities and your lands and your possessions, rather than we should visit you with the sword. So basically, we're going to kill you if you don't just basically give everything over to us. Or in other words, yield yourselves up unto us and unite with us.
Unite.
Now, this is the friendly part here.
Unite.
Just become part of us and become acquainted with our secret works and become our brethren, that ye may be like unto us, not our slaves, but our brethren and partners of all of our substance. And we
Now,
swear
let's
to you,
talk
if you do
about
this,
that.
then we won't
Yeah.
kill you.
Let's talk about that, right? I mean, there it is right there. That's communism 101. Why don't you just come on over and share in all this stuff? Well, remember what these people are doing, right? They've already separated themselves out from the Nephites and Lamanites at this point, living in the mountains, sallying forth day after day, attacking the outer lands of the Nephites and stealing, robbing, murdering, taking slaves. Well, how can, and this is, all right, we're not going to be political about this, but Ronald Reagan thought the exact same thing about the Soviet Union. How can a society like that survive if you put them under an economic pressure point? Because all their economic is stolen.
Yes. They don't produce anything of their own.
They produce nothing. And then the stuff they do produce is so shallowly wasted because they went ahead and would distribute through government, and government's the worst distributor there is. And, you know, you put them under economic pressure, it just crushes them. And ultimately, Laconius chooses a very similar tactic: suck all the stuff that they could have grabbed, all the resources they could have grabbed and ate out of their way. In which case, they just crumbled. They couldn't even mount an attack against the big city at all.
Yeah, it's kind of like the Chop Chaz thing. I mean, basically,
I was thinking about that.
Did you see the garden that they planted?
Oh, that was a wonderful garden.
Wonderful garden. I mean, I'm sure there was probably 4 or 5 people who got to eat something off of it.
I bet you not. I bet you one lady went out there and put some stuff in the ground and then let it. And then it's supposed to be a commune thing, so maybe it grows, maybe it doesn't. I don't know.
Maybe people come and eat it before. Maybe they get hungry before it grows up enough.
Right.
But anyway,
Let's go eat some grass.
Yeah, it's kind of interesting. Yeah.
What were the people of Chaz going to do once they ran out of food in their district? They were going to sally forth and go into the stores.
That's right. They're going to sally forth into
watch out if Chaz gets established in another city somewhere else. When they run out of food in their stores because they have no supplies and nobody's supplying them, where are they going to do? They don't want to buy food. No, they're going to go steal food. Where are they going to steal from? The local community around them. And it's going to expand.
Yeah. Yeah, that's exactly how this whole thing works. He basically, Gideon says in verse 9, he says, I am Gideon and I am the governor of this secret society of Gadianton. So now they've evolved or developed to the point where now it's not just a bunch of hoodlums. They have some leadership now.
They got a rapper in charge.
They got a rapper in charge here, and they're ready to go.
Now, if you don't know what that means, because you're watching this 2 years from now,
there are people who
Chaz and Chop had a rapper in charge of their group. Right? It just got eliminated last week. I mean, or just a few days ago. Eliminated. They took it out.
Took it out.
But there was a rapper in charge of that group.
Yeah. Okay. So. Verse 10, and I write this epistle unto you, Laconius, and I hope that you will deliver up your lands and your possessions without the shedding of blood, that this my people may recover their rights and government, who have descended away from you because of their wickedness and retaining from them their rights of government. Except you do this, I will avenge their wrongs. So the wrongs I can see some of the things that Chaz was demanding is that everybody should have free education, free health care, free basically everything.
Well, in Chaz,
shouldn't have to work.
It was all about reparations.
Yes.
So, and reparations is just another way of stealing, a government way of stealing from one and giving to another, which is
redistribution of
wealth, which is socialism, which in this case, because they're using force to do it, that's called communism.
Yep. Now we got to kind of hustle through some of this here.
You guys follow all that? Okay.
Yeah.
Just check.
There we go. All right. So verse 11. This is our Governor Laconius. Then he realizes that this is pretty bold. In fact, he says right here in verse 1, he says that he was exceedingly astonished because of the boldness of Gideon demanding the possession of the land of the Nephites, and also threatening the people and avenging the wrongs of those that had received no wrong. See, this is where I was coming from before. You know, these people have never experienced this. They have no reason to think that they are owed anything by the Nephites. In fact, most of them are dissenting from the Nephites, but yet they get this small group of Lamanites to feel like they were the ones that got wronged, and then the dissenters of the Nephites basically
use them as troops.
Use them. Yeah, they're just using and abusing these Lamanites for that reason. Now behold, this Lyconius, the governor, was a just man. He could not be frightened by the demands and threatenings of a robber. I love that. That actually happened I heard like up in Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. There's a whole group of protesters that were coming in there, and the citizens basically banded together and basically met them with their bus and said, "You can come out and you can protest all you want to, but if it gets out of control, we have all these people here, and we are not going to put up with you burning down our city."
I've been following that specific story for a long time. Not just Coeur d'Alene, Idaho. It happened in California. Mm-hmm. It happened in Ohio. It happened in.
Happened in Provo.
I've seen it in Utah. I was going to say Provo. Yeah, it happened. A
couple of days ago.
Yeah, a couple of days ago. It happened in Provo. It happened everywhere. Watch for that, because that moment when they're shooting, and then it's going to happen, and then once the next step is an organization will be born, and that's the kingdom of God being birthed, and that's what you need to see it, and watch for that when it comes. Yeah. It might have already happened by the time you've been watched this video.
Yeah,
I'm not sure. It's going to happen soon though.
Yeah. All right, and then let's see. In verse 13, yea, he sent a proclamation among all the people that they should gather together their women and their children and their flocks and their herds and their substance, save it were in their land, unto one place. They basically said, you know what? It's not safe to be in Zarahemla and Bountiful anymore. We have to gather together to one place. And then he caused that fortifications should be built round about them, and the strength thereof should be exceedingly great. So I think this is part of his letter.
Actually, the place they said was like a line between Bountiful and Zarahemla. It's a big trench. In other words, they're pulling in all the outlying cities and all the outlying towns, and they're just concentrating everything in a line between Bountiful and Zarahemla.
But they're actually abandoning their main cities.
Yep.
Which is really interesting. They're going to place guards round about to watch them and guard them. And then Lyconius prophesies to his people. He says basically that if you don't get yourself right with God, we're going to get destroyed. But if you do, then I promise you it's going to come out okay. We're going to be all right. And then Gideon appointed as the chief captain and commander of the Nephite armies in verse 17. He was the chiefest among all the captains. I love this part, though, in 19. It says, now it was the custom among the Nephites to appoint for their chief captains somebody who had the spirit of revelation and prophecy.
Yep.
A religious person. Boy,
yep.
how nice would that be to have that in the United States today among our military, to have our military leaders basically being prophetic, or being able to receive revelation.
Right? I mean, you could pray. Where's the enemy going? There they're going. Okay, let's cut them off.
Yeah, exactly.
And I mean, that's happened many times.
Yes.
That happened many times in the book of Alma.
Yep.
And in the future, that there's good evidence to say that might happen again too.
Yeah.
Not to say that it's going to be a church member or anything, but it's just going to be
somebody's
going to know something, and it's going to get some heavenly help to cut off some enemies.
Yeah, Washington did, and so forth.
Yep.
in different battles there and also later on in the Civil War too.
Yeah, that's true.
All right, so verse 20. Now the people said unto Gideon, pray unto the Lord and let us go up into the mountains and into the wilderness, and we're going to go in and get these robbers, and we're going to roust them out and take them down.
Which is the exact same thing they've been trying for the past few years, and it hasn't worked at all.
They failed every time. When they tried to go out and get them, it didn't work. And Gideon said, the Lord forbid, for if we should go up against them, the Lord will deliver us into their hands. Therefore we will prepare ourselves in the center of our lands, and we'll gather our armies together, and we will not go against them, but we will wait until they come against us. Therefore the Lord, as the Lord liveth, if we do this, he will deliver them into our hands. Now, in verse 22, and it came to pass in the 17th year, in the latter end of the year, the proclamation of Lyconius had gone forth through all the face of the land. Now, the proclamation went out in the 16th year. Now, this is the latter end of the 17th year, so it's taken them about a year and a half for the proclamation to go out, and the people began to move. I said they brought their horses and their chariots and their cattle and their flocks and their herds and their grain and the substance, did march forth by the thousands of the tens of thousands till they had all gone forth to the place which had been appointed, that they should gather themselves together to defend themselves against their enemies. And the land which was appointed was the land of Zarahemla and the land Bountiful. Now you have to understand where this is coming from. Many of you probably have the Moroni's America Maps edition. And if you have that, you can go here to the Helaman through Moroni portion of it here. And basically you have the land bountiful. Let's see if we can see that here. So you have the land bountiful over here. And then you have the land of Zarahemla over here in green. And so this was in the center of their land. So they would be coming from both directions. And then, but they didn't just stay right there. Now it says, and the land which was appointed was the land of Zarahemla and the land bountiful, yea, to the line which was between the land bountiful and the land of desolation. That would have been north. But then in the verse 24, and there were a great many thousand people who were called Nephites, who did gather themselves together in this land. Now Laconius did cause that they should gather themselves together in the land southward, because of the great curse which was upon the land northward. So basically,
so they weren't going up into Michigan
instead of being straight between them, he actually went south. And if you go south, there's a really interesting place there. The bottom of Illinois is kind of shaped like a bottom of an arrowhead.
Yep.
And on the south and west side, you have the Mississippi River, and on the south and east side, you have the Ohio. And it causes this big kind of like a point there. All along the bottom of that, about 20, 30 miles from the actual confluence of those two rivers, going northward, about 30, 40 miles north of there, there is a line of fortifications that go all the way along a bluff that exists right there. There's about 35 to 40 of these different places, and I want to show you just a couple of quick aspects here.
That'd be just south of Gary, Indiana, wouldn't it?
Yeah, this would be by Cairo,
Okay.
Illinois.
I used to drive through there.
They actually call it Cairo.
Gary, Indiana is always a traffic jam. It would have been this time, too.
Yeah, that's right. It's interesting. Also, this is by a place called Maconda, Illinois, and there's a place called the Giant City State Park. When I do my tours, I actually take people to this place called Stone Fort, which is one of the fortifications that was left afterwards. Now I'm going to play this little video section here. This is from Nephite Explorer and Ryan Fisher, and it shows some pictures of this area here. But they actually had, brothers and sisters, they had all these different fortifications going along so that the river formed three sides, and all they had to do was defend the northern side. If they were coming from the north, they'd all come down there, they'd put their fortifications around there, and they literally would be centered in their lands. But to the south, just like exactly like it's describing here in the Book of Mormon, they would have the river. The river's over a mile wide on both sides, so it would be very difficult. You couldn't sneak up on anybody, basically, in those areas. Mm-hmm. And they had line of sight all the way along there, so they could actually send messages either by flashing with a piece of mica or building a fire and doing the smoke signal kind of thing. But they actually, all the way along there, almost 60 miles from one end to the other, from river to river, along that line, they could actually deliver messages and be able to tell information back and forth across there within just a few hours.
In other words, we have a Great Wall of China in America,
Yeah.
south of Gary, Indiana.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Now, another interesting aspect of this, and we haven't ever gotten into this part of it, but well, maybe we shouldn't. I'll just say that there are two. A lot of you are aware of the fact that there's these two solar eclipses that are happening. One happened in 2017. The other one's happening in 2024. Those two solar eclipses make an X right across the United States of America, and where that X, where those two meet each other at that intersection point, is right over the top of this specific place.
Ooh.
So the place where we believe that the Nephites were gathered together into one place to overcome this siege by the Gideon robbers actually is the place that is blotted out twice. And what did they have to do here? So you have basically Laconius. He in chapter 4, the Nephites. He tells them that they have to have 7 years supply of food, right?
7 years.
Okay, now that's interesting. Why 7 years? Well, how many years did the
Pharaoh.
Egyptians have to put in
7
to overcome that? You see, twice in the scriptures, it's talked about the 7 years being the salvation, basically, of their physical needs. There's never been anywhere in the scriptures where a 2-year supply of food saved the people, or a 72-hour kit was sufficient.
That's true.
It was 7 years.
And I believe Brigham Young, when he first came out with the commandment for food storage, it was 7 years of food storage, not just
That's
1,
right.
2, or 3.
Yeah, but there was enough members of the church who didn't do the 7 years. So, well, if you don't get 7 years, we'll then get 2.
Yeah.
And there's enough people that didn't get 2 years. Well, if you don't get 2 years, well, then get 72-hour kit or whatever.
Right.
Have something. Anyway. So I think it behooves us, according to the scriptures, to have a serious supply of food here. Okay, and
now notice they had a 7-year supply of food, but they didn't need all 7 years because we're going to find out the Gideonites couldn't even survive that long in the wilderness on their own animals. Apparently, they couldn't hunt; they just wiped out all their population.
Yeah,
the end of it.
It says it said this is in chapter 4. The Nephites starved the Gideonite robbers. In the latter end of the 18th years, the armies of the robbers were prepared for battle. And they came down. They sallied forth from the hills and the mountains, and the wilderness, and the strongholds, and their secret places.
Here come the hordes.
Come out of everywhere. They started to take possession of the lands which the Nephites had deserted, and the cities which had been left desolate. So they left their cities even.
Yeah.
Basically, every Nephite had to leave their comfort of their own home.
Most likely, at first, these Gideonite robbers probably thought that that Laconius actually gave in to their wishes, because look, they just abandoned their stuff. We'll take their stuff. Well, it turns out when they go into this stuff, there's no food in there, and there's nothing.
And there's no animals.
Yeah.
And there were no wild beasts nor game in those lands which had been deserted by the Nephites. So apparently they even wiped out all of the game and so forth that were there. And there was no game for the robbers, save it was in the wilderness. And the robbers ate nothing but meat, it says. So there's no chance for the robbers to obtain food. And so they had reserved this as in...
they had no one they could steal off of.
Yeah, verse 4. They had been reserved for themselves provisions and horses and cattle and flocks of every kind, that they might subsist for the space of 7 years. Now they also had enough land in this if this area is big enough, if this was the land where they were in, they had plenty of land still that they could protect, that they could actually do some farming.
Yep.
But they didn't have developed farms at this point in time, so they're probably mostly living off of food storage, maybe some, gathering of berries and nuts and those kinds of things, and fish, and trying to do whatever they can to come up with this enough food. And in verse 5, it came to pass in the 19th year, Gideon found it was expedient that he should go up to battle against the Nephites, for there was no way they could subsist, save it was to rob and murder and plunder. See,
there's your answer.
That's the problem with communism and this kind of thing. This is kind of like the mob.
The Nephites gave them their land, and they couldn't survive. Even with all the tillable, good
farmland,
they couldn't even do that. They had to go rob and attack the huge, structure that the Nephites had built up in Gary, Indiana, south of that.
That's right.
So,
that's right.
They couldn't even live on the lands of the Nephites at all.
Yeah, see, that's the problem with communism and socialism, is that eventually you run out of other people's stuff.
Right. And internal collapse, what happens.
Yeah, and that's why it doesn't work, because there's no incentive for people to actually produce things. So they basically they're relying on somebody else to produce it so they can steal it. Well, once there's nobody producing anything, there's nothing to steal, and they starve.
Yep.
This is how it always works. This is why communism never has worked in the world
and this
for very
is
long.
Why, if you understand also that socialism is communism, it's only in the manner of the takeover that's the difference. In other words, communism does it by force. Vladimir Lenin, right? And then you got socialism, who votes it in, which makes sense, right? They voted in, and then it's supposed to work the same way in some utopia paradise. It is impossible to live that way because it's against the commandments of God.
Yeah.
Now,
by the sweat of thy brow shalt thou eat thy bread. Yeah.
By the sweat of thy brow. Not the sweat of thy brother's brow, not the sweat of thy sister's brow, the sweat of your brow.
This is also why slavery
doesn't work
wrong.
Either. That's right. So when you look at all this together, you got to look. This is serious business. We're talking about scriptures as it relates to America, especially as if you combine this material with the material we saw before. So that leads you to a conclusion. Who do you support? Who do you support? Who do you want to, support with your dollars or your votes or whoever? It makes a difference, because the philosophy underlying all of it, if it's socialism, is evil. And the prophets have always spoken about against communism and socialism. If you're new to the church and this is new material to you, please go back and read Ezra Taft Benson, An Enemy Hath Done This. It'll be the biggest wake-up call you ever saw.
Well, one thing I've always found that's really interesting, all these people who are like a Chop and Chaz and the other movements where they've just kind of occupy whatever. Don't these people have jobs? How can they just hang out all day long? Where are they getting their money from? Where are they getting their food from? How are they? I just wondered why. How can they just stay there for weeks on end? I couldn't do that. I mean, I have to get out and make enough money to live and make a house payment and so forth. Apparently, these people don't have to worry about it.
They don't.
Because they're living off of somebody else. Usually, their parents.
Well, Seattle's a different story because Seattle has, next to San Francisco, the greatest number of homeless population in America. Yeah. And ultimately, the people voted it that way. The people are getting angry at the city council. You have to go look at a documentary on YouTube. I saw it the other day. If you can find it, it's it was done by a news organization. It was about an hour long. And it was talking about the homeless problem in Seattle. Yeah, and the amount of drugs are on and the psychotic behavior they do.
Police are not allowed to.
The police are not allowed to clean it up because the city council and the mayor do not want it cleaned up, and because of their political philosophy. Don't know if that goes with your philosophy. I don't know.
This is why the Book of Mormon is as current as the Daily News.
But this material is telling us what we should do in our lives, and therefore it's religion. We should emulate it.
Yeah. Now it says basically, and this is verse 5, and it came to pass in the 19th year, Gideon found that it was expedient that they should go up to battle and so forth, and they couldn't do it. It came to pass there was a huge battle in verse 7. In the 6th month, behold, a great and terrible was the day that he came into battle. Now this is an interesting also aspect. They were girded about after the manner of robbers, and they had a lambskin about their loins.
Yeah.
Now, I got to tell you some things about this because Amberly Nelson actually has some great information and insights about this. Mm-hmm. And basically, number one, if they have lambskins, what do they have to have?
Lamb.
They have to have lambs. Lambs are indigenous, sheep are indigenous to North America, but there's never been any evidence for any sheep in Central America or the Mesoamerica area. So
how many times do we got to beat that dead horse?
Yes.
This is North America, guys.
Yeah, they didn't even have a horse.
Everybody watching this
have a dead horse to beat.
Yeah.
There's no horses down there. Have horses in North America, but not Central America. Okay.
My heart delights in the truth.
That's right.
And it's just the truth of it. It's sitting right there. It's everywhere you see it.
But why did they choose lambskin? Why not deer skin? I mean, there's probably a lot of deer out there.
Why not leopard skin?
Oh, yeah. Well, they didn't mention leopards.
They didn't mention leopard, did they?
Or palm trees.
No.
Or any other animal that's in Central America.
Nope.
But nevertheless, they had these lambskins, and I just think it's fascinating because in order to live the law of Moses, they had to have sheep or lambs to offer up as sacrifices. So when apparently the Nephites didn't bring all of their sheep with them because these guys went out and got their probably the Nephite sheep, which was also essentially that was an interesting aspect because that means that they were denying the Nephites the sheep that they needed in order to do the laws of Moses.
Possibly, or it could just be that because the lands were cleared out, that was what they could get early on. And notice something else. This chapter, 3rd Nephi, comes way after the chapter of Moroni. Captain Moroni with the super equipment and breastplates and shields and bucklers and all that stuff, head pieces. Well, these people knew history. I mean, they obviously would have known something happened, 50 years ago that was better than what they got. They came to battle with lambskins. Now, that's probably because they couldn't get any supplies living in their cities where they were because there were none left.
Yeah.
So they came up with literally nothing trying to fight a giant Nephi army that's in one place.
Yeah. And I think that also could be that they were trying to show how masculine and how amazing they are that they come in nothing but a lambskin, The
Lamanites tried that one over and over and over. Never where they came up with their head shorn and almost naked, and that's a great way to go to battle. And Captain Moroni just cleaned the slate with them.
Yeah, but these guys were dyed in blood.
Yep.
They had head plates upon them,
yep.
And great and terrible was the appearance of the armies of Gideon high because of their armor, and they began to have had dyed in blood. probably the blood of the lambs, which is, again, this is a direct affront to them. In fact, if you look at page 385 in the annotated Book of Mormon, it says the Nephites observed, this is at the bottom there. And by the way, we know that these ancient people who we believe to be the Nephites, this is the Hopewell Mound Builder people, they had sheep. They had lambs. And here's some of the evidence for that. We have the actual artifacts that look like a sheep. Basically, these are stone artifacts that have been carved out to make them look like a lamb or a sheep. You can see that from their profiles there. Also, there's been ram horns made out of copper and so forth. So these people clearly had these, whereas Central America, they didn't have any of this. But this is interesting. It says right here in the bottom, the Nephites observed the law of Moses by sacrificing lambs during Passover. The Lamanites possibly mocked the Nephites and their religion by wearing a lambskin about their loins, dyed in blood. The Lamanites might have killed Nephite lambs, then wore and displayed the lambskin as an act of defiance and sacrilege to the law of Moses during battles with the Nephites.
Yeah.
So that's a kind of a speculation.
Lambskin and blood.
Interesting that they chose those two things to decorate themselves with, as that basically this is an in-your-face, your God didn't stop us from doing this, right?
Yep.
So there you go.
Yep.
And it came to pass that the armies of the Nephites, when they saw the appearance of the army of Gideon, had fallen to the earth, not because they were so scared.
To pray.
They were definitely scared.
Yeah.
These guys were horrendous. Can you imagine? You know, it's like you have a whole bunch of people showing up in your city, and they've got blood of some kind on them all over the place, and they're obviously bloodthirsty here. And they were not falling to the earth because they were afraid. They were falling to the earth to ask God for deliverance. And the Lamanites, the Gideon robbers, they didn't get that.
They misunderstood.
Yep. The Nephites did not fear them, but they did fear their God and did supplicate him for protection. All right, and then getting down here too, and it came to pass that Gideon commanded that his army should pursue. Oh, so they basically, there's a huge slaughter. Nephites beat them. Then they started to retreat, and basically rather than letting these guys go, they basically would chase them down, and if they fell into their hands, they were not to spare them. This is what happens when you get to a certain level of, you don't have the manpower and the food to basically house and put up these people who are basically determined to kill you. So it's basically, that's it for them. Verse 14, it came to pass that Gideon, who had stood and fought with boldness, this is the bad guy here, the robber, was pursued as he fled, and being weary because of his much fighting, it was overtaken and slain, and thus was the end of Gideon the robber. I love how they just kind of end there. Done.
He's done.
Yep. Came to pass that the armies, this is verse 15, it came to pass that the armies of the Nephites did return again to their place of security. See, so they would go out and they would kind of just do a small attacks here and there against the Lamanites, or against the Gideons. And it was weakening them to the point where they basically forced them to have to actually attack. And that's when they really got
they got the surrender.
Yep. And they came up on all sides. So then they decided, the Gideons said, okay, let's get out of here. We're going to head to the north. and they said, nothing doing. You are not going to go and then come back again later on and keep feeding off of us. So they went in the nighttime. They got around in front of them. So in the morning, when these Gideons decided they were going to head off to the north, they were surrounded. And it says, cut them off. They hemmed them in on every side, and then cut them off from all their outer privileges, that they could cause them to yield themselves up according to their wishes. And Zarahemnah was then taken down, basically, and let's see. I think it's just a little bit later when they have the public hanging of Zarahemnah. So because Gideon had been taken down, he was killed. Then Zarahemnah was chosen to be the leader of the Gideons. It was impossible for the robbers to lay siege sufficiently long to have any effect upon the Nephites, because they had food, because there were many provisions, and they didn't have any provisions for themselves. And the wild game became scarce in the wilderness in verse 20, insomuch that the robbers were about to perish with hunger. Nephites were continually marching out by day and night and falling upon their armies and cutting them off by the thousands, by the tens of thousands. And then, of course, then they get Gideon. Then he defeats Zarahemnah, and they decide to, as a message, they hung him in a tree, and then they cut the tree down. And interestingly enough, that's a Hebrew thing to do.
Yep.
That's an interesting thing. If you look at the bottom of page 386 in the Annotated Book of Mormon, they did fell the tree to the earth. This is in verse 28 of 3rd Nephi 4. And it says, the tree on which Zarahemnah was hung was felled. Was this ever done in antiquity? Apparently it was. For one thing, Israelite practice required that the tree upon which the culprit was hung be buried with the body. Hence, the tree had to be chopped down. Why was the tree chopped down and buried? As Maimonides explains, in order that it should not serve as a sad reminder with the people, saying, this is the tree on which so-and-so was hanged. In this way, the tree became associated with the person being executed. It came to symbolize the culprit and the desire to forget him or her.
In other words, there should be no memorial to this man.
Yeah, no monuments. Nope, no statues. This guy is going to be gone forever. But it's kind of funny because he actually ended up in the gold plates. so
we
we're
have
still talking about
we have
him
his
today.
name recorded here.
But yeah, his name is there too.
But only in a negative fashion. There will be nobody remembering him in a positive way.
And nobody remembered him in their time, which was the way they were trying to end it. Okay, then we have chapter 5. I love the simile curse at the public hanging of Zarahemnah. Basically, there were some words that were said there. They did rejoice and cry again with one voice, saying, may the God of Abraham and the God of Isaac and the God of Jacob protect this people in righteousness so long as they can call on the name of their God for protection. Brothers and sisters, are we ready to ask for the Lord's protection when things start to happen like this is happening with them? We better be ready and righteous enough to be able to ask for these blessings. 3rd Nephi chapter 5. And now there was not living a soul among the people of the Nephites who did doubt in the least the words of all the holy prophets who had spoken. It's amazing how war and death and carnage brings people's hearts back around to God.
And helps them gain a testimony in what's true and not what's false.
Yeah.
Because the false lies had been culminated with the establishment of the Gadianton robbers, with their social communism, and with their ideas of Lucifer. When they finally go ahead and banish all of that stuff from the earth, the people have a reborn testimony, and this becomes a more conservative time for them.
Yeah.
But it doesn't live long, but at least it is a conservative time for them.
Yeah. So they had the trial of the captured robbers in verse 4. They did cast their prisoners into prison to cause the word of God to be preached to them. How would that be if our prison systems were set up so that when you have prisoners of war, basically you say, okay, you can listen to our gospel and we'll teach you the truth and the things that you weren't taught as a kid. And if you accept it, then great. And if you don't, then it basically says, well, if you accept it, they said they were set at liberty. And if you don't, if you continue with your breathing out of threatenings against the brethren, and those people were then condemned and punished according to the law. Now, it doesn't say if they were put to death or not, but that's my guess.
Jail sentence, death, whatever it is.
Yeah. And they put an end to all those wicked and secret and abominable combinations in which there was so much wickedness and so many murders committed. And that was the end of the Gadianton Wars for now.
For now. Yep.
Yeah. So then Mormon comments on the record. He goes through the years 23, 24, and 25 in real short order right there. The Mormon's named after the land of Mormon, where the covenant was restored. I love this is because Mormon was named after the land, actually.
Yep.
And so the Book of Mormon itself was named after him.
The land of Mormon.
And so the Book of Mormon itself was named after the land of Mormon. And what was the land of Mormon known for? It's where the covenant was restored. It's all about this covenant. And behold, I am Mormon, being called after the land of Mormon, the land in which Alma did establish the church among the people. And that's when they basically reestablished the covenant of the land, the American covenant. Yea, and the first church which was established among them after their transgression. Behold, I am a disciple of Jesus Christ, the Son of God. I love that. I have been called of him to declare his word among his people, that they might have everlasting life. I
love it that when you talk about the Book of Mormon, I like that these Mormon interjections. He happens in the words of Mormon between Mosiah and Alma. It happens, or right before Mosiah. It happens in again in Third Nephi here. It happens in Alma. It happens these little like interjections of Mormon. It basically, because the Book of Mormon does not read in a sequential story order, if you will. It jumps. That's more likely to be true because that's more likely to have 1,000 years of history recorded on plates. You might see a few jumps here and there. Mm-hmm. And that lends itself again to the truthfulness of the Book of Mormon, that this is a very complicated book.
Yeah, and it was written by numerous people, and then abridged by one guy.
Yep.
But even though it was abridged by Mormon, he still managed to be able to pull out things from each different writer that each one of them is unique.
Right.
And the word print analysis and everything else.
I was going to say, the voice, the word print voice type of thing, when you read it, the people who write are very different. I mean, you can see that if you read Nephi and then you read over here and, you read Moroni, the wording is very different. Yet it was even translated by one man, Joseph Smith Jr. So, again, more complications in the Book of Mormon, which leads to its authenticity.
Yeah, exactly. Now, in verse 14, it says that this is Mormon. He says that he should make a record of these things which had been done, yea, a small record of that which hath taken place from the time that Lehi left Jerusalem, even down until the present time. So basically, everything that we have prior to this, he talks about that being the small record. Hmm? But we're now more than halfway through the Book of Mormon itself, and this is the small part.
Now we're going to make the switch.
So this actually tells us that there was the 2/3 that was sealed. He did it.
Want to hold that up?
It's done. Yeah, we're talking about
this right here.
This much of it right here.
Let's
see if you can see it from here. But here, I'll hold it up here. Okay, so basically this is the sealed portion right here. From this point on down was sealed, and this part up. So this is the small portion here that he's talking about. Could be just that upper part of the plates.
And do you know what's in the sealed portion? I never read it. I don't know, but but do you know what it's made of?
More good stuff.
Moroni says what it's in there.
Yeah.
Moroni was the one that sealed it.
Yeah.
Moroni says that is the record of the brother of Jared, where the visions that are so compelling that you don't even need faith to believe it because it's so powerful and overcoming.
Yeah,
that's
awesome.
What's in there.
That's cool.
I look forward to reading that, most likely in the New Jerusalem.
Yeah. Now, in verse 20, I want to point this out. He claims, he says, I am Mormon and am a pure descendant of Lehi. Well, how would he know at this point in time that he's a pure descendant of Lehi? Because this was him writing after Christ had already come and after 400 more years have happened from when we just are looking at here. This is right before Christ comes. This is Mormon clear at the very end, and he says, I'm a pure descendant of Lehi. This is even after the 200 years of peace. He couldn't make that statement unless he knew his ancestry, unless he knew his genealogical heritage, basically, going all the way back. But he says he is a pure descendant of Lehi, which means that these people had records somehow that they managed to get through this whole thing, but he knew that he was a pure descendant.
Well, technically, if you think about logically,
all
the people would be pure descendants of Lehi, except for the Zoramites and the Mulekites.
Yeah.
That would be the only two groups that would not be Lehites.
Yep, and he says, surely he hath blessed the house of Jacob and hath been merciful unto the seed of Joseph, because the seed of Joseph, his land is here in America. So this is reiterating the fact that Joseph did get an inheritance, and it's here in America. Let's see. Then Mormon prophesies concerning the gathering of the house of Jacob in verses 23 through 26. And then you have, and he says, he talks about here in verse 25, he says, the restoring of all the house of Jacob unto the knowledge of the covenant that he hath covenanted with them. So there's been this covenant with the house of Jacob ever since Jacob first arrived here on the Promised Land. This covenant was there, and I love the fact that we have Nephi, basically, that also talks about this covenant. And then Mormon, the land of Mormon is where Alma was when he restored the covenant. And then Mormon,
Alma the elder, by the way.
And then Mormon was named after the land where that happened.
Yep.
So the whole book of Mormon is literally named after this land, which was the place where the covenant originally initiated. Isn't that cool?
Mm-hmm.
I thought that was pretty cool. Okay. The chapter 6, we're just about done here, folks. And it came to pass that the people of the Nephites did all return to their own lands in the 26th year. So this is now 26 years since the sign of Samuel. And all the people of the Nephites, they went from the center of their lands. They now dispersed back out and moved back into their lands where they were originally at, both on the north and on the south, and the land northward and land southward. And they granted that those robbers that had entered into a covenant to keep the peace of the band or the land, who were desirous to remain Lamanites, lands according to their numbers, and they might have with their labors within to subsist upon. So they could now subsist with their labors. They couldn't just live off of everybody else. And thus they did establish peace in all the land.
No plunder.
No ripping off. No being lazy. You basically had to work for your living. And you can have specialization of labor, but you had to labor. Okay. And it came to pass that there were many cities built anew, and there were many old cities repaired, and there were many highways cast up, and many roads made. And that goes into in page 389 of the annotated Book of Mormon. We talk about the Great Hopewell Road.
Oh, yeah.
Which is an amazing structure up in Newark, Ohio, that stretches for almost 60 miles. It was 60 miles long, but the interesting thing, it was straight as an arrow. Even by satellite, it's straight, and you can only see about 10 or 12 miles because of the curvature of the earth. So somehow they were doing this to maybe some astronomical alignment, possibly, but it was also leveled for 60 miles, and it was 200 feet wide. It was wide enough to land modern-day Boeing aircraft on it. Mm-hmm. It was so wide. And it led to their greatest achievement, basically, as a civilization, which was the Hopewell Mound Builder. This is the Newark Complex. And the Newark Complex, if you've seen our previous podcasts, you know what is going on with the Newark Complex. This is the Great Octagon, the Great Circle. This is where the entire plan of salvation is embedded into the actual physical landscape of the earth there. The largest temple complex in the world even today is still there. And this is where that road led to, right up through the middle of the land bountiful.
Yep.
Anyway, so
that's one big straight road.
It's a pretty awesome road.
But don't skip this next part.
Yeah, go ahead.
Make sure you read 10 and 11.
Go ahead.
All right, so now they're going to start sinking in again. After they have great prosperity, this is what happens again. But it came to pass in the 29th year. So that's like, 2 or 3 years later?
Mm-hmm.
There began to be some disputings among the people. For some were lifted up in pride and boastings, because of their exceeding great riches, yea, even into great persecutions. And the key is number 11. For there were many merchants in the land, and also many lawyers, and many officers. The key there is to realize that righteous law, when it comes to having a righteous government, the laws must be straight. Once the laws get convoluted, and the only one that can convolute laws are the government officers as well as the lawyers who influence them. Once you do that, then judges, right? The judges are supposed to judge upon the law, but not make law. But when they do that, they start messing with the laws. Then the people start to become wicked, basically become government subsidies or government inducements.
Plus, it kind of becomes a cat and mouse situation.
Yeah. And Lucifer knows this, by the way.
One of the founding fathers, I can't remember for sure, but I think it was John Adams, said that the Constitution is wholly inadequate for an unrighteous and immoral people.
True.
Because if people will not govern themselves, then you have to make more and more strict laws, which impinge upon the other populations who will control themselves. And you have to have more and more defined laws down to the point where it becomes ridiculously refined.
If that's all it was, I would be still happy. That is not what it is. We have gone so far beyond that point that we're in crud land right now. This is Gadiantans who are about to, in 4 presidents from now, as you've seen in Ezra's Eagle, take over. And the laws are so convoluted, and they're going to keep getting more convoluted to encourage more wickedness and eventually attacks upon righteousness. It's that bad. We're at that phase. So more and more laws to stop more and more people, to put more and more people in jail, that was like 100 years ago. we're so far past that this is a very different situation here.
The cat and mouse thing is basically no matter what law they pass, somebody will try to find a little loophole somewhere that they can exploit. And so they plug that loophole and they find another one. They plug that loophole and they find another one, because it's not a moral people. They're literally trying to find a escape route all the time.
Find and do evil.
They will not be governed by righteous laws.
Law. Right. Now, in the future, though, I'm not a pessimist. I'm actually
realist.
No, I'm the other side of pessimism. The optimism.
Yeah.
The reason is because I see where all this goes, and Ezra's eagle shows where it goes, and so does the Book of Mormon shows where it goes. At the end of the destruction, there is a restoration again.
Yeah.
And that restoration again is about restoring that which was lost, namely our constitutional rights and our God-given constitutional rights. And that's where all of this leads. And it shows in Ezra's eagle, and it shows it here. What happens after the destruction of the Nephite society? A Zion society starts.
That's right.
And it was the greatest one on this continent so far that we're aware of. Besides that, Enoch and all that.
Yeah, City of Enoch.
Yeah, except for that one.
Yeah.
But it was the best one up in the last couple thousand years. And we're going to get it again. And when we build it again, it's going to be even better this time. And that one will never fail until Christ comes.
Yeah. So let's finish this up here with we've got chapter 7. Chapter 6 basically you have corrupt execution of the prophets. In verse 22.
And who executed them? The lawyers and judges got together again and resurrected those old plans once more.
Yep. It says there was no lawyer nor judge nor high priest that could have power to condemn anyone to death, save their condemnation was signed by the governor of the land. Now there were many those who testified of the things pertaining to Christ, who testified boldly, who were taken and put to death secretly by the judges, that the knowledge of their death came not to the governor of the land until after their death. Now behold, this was contrary to the laws of the land, that any man should put to death, except they had power from the governor of the land. Therefore a complaint came up unto the land of Zarahemla, to the governor of the land, against these judges who had been condemning the prophets of the Lord unto death, not according to the law.
And at 21, at the end of 21 is where you see who they are.
Yeah.
Chiefly the chief judges, who had been high priests and lawyers, and they were the lawyers and angry with those who testified of these things.
Sounds like the deep state.
Yeah. Yep. That's it.
The people who were in control. The deep state people, they were completely out of control, killing people at their whim, and not letting the governor of the land, or the president, if you will, even know that they're doing it.
Yep.
Now it came to pass that they were taken and brought before the judge to be judged of the crime which they had done according to the law which had been given by the people. Now it came to pass that those judges had many friends and kindreds, and the remainder, yea, almost all the lawyers and the high priest did gather themselves together and unite with the hundreds of their judges who were to be tried according to the law. And they did enter into a covenant one with another, yea,
Covenant.
Even unto that covenant which was given them of old, which covenant was given and ministered by the devil to combine against all righteousness. Therefore,
secret combinations are of the devil.
Yep.
If you are in a secret combination, and I know members that are, they think it's okay. They think it's all right. They think it's fine. It's just a brotherhood or something, right? It's not. This says it's not. God does nothing in the dark. He does everything in the light.
Yeah. Yep. And so guess what they want to do? They want to establish a kingship again. I said they did set at defiance the law and the rights of their country. In other words, they just decided that they're not going to obey the law. The law is there, but they're just not going to obey it. It kind of reminds me of sanctuary cities and other places where they just decided we're just not going to obey the law.
That's called anarchy.
Immigration laws and so forth.
Yep.
And they did,
anarchy zone again.
Yep. And they did covenant one with another to destroy the governor of the land and to establish a king over the land, that the land should no more be at liberty, but should be subject unto kings.
Now this doesn't mention the guy's name. Laconius is gone by this point. This is someone else. It doesn't mention his name. This is the last short feather. And these guys take them down again. So at the end, you've already seen the slide earlier. I've shown it to you. It's the last short feather on the entire. That's not there, but it's the last short feather in the entire Nephite kingdom. And these secret combinations rise up once again and take them down. And at that point, though, they don't have a plan for governorship. They don't have a plan for leadership. No, the entire Nephite civilization degrades for about 3 years into tribes. Or about 5 years, I think, 4 years, something like that, into tribes.
They were finally successful at destroying the government.
Yep. And then guess what? The tribes go to war with one another. And then it doesn't say this per se, but the secret combinations start gathering together again in those same old areas of the Appalachian Mountains, and they restore and build cities there. And when the Lord comes, he destroys those cities, and they say the name of the guys who built those cities was Jacob. You have to read it real close in the sequence to see it, but that's exactly what the guy's name is. Jacob. He built cities, and he was a secret combination guy, and the Lord destroyed them all.
Yeah. Yep. And so, basically, in verse 7, they did cause a great contention in the land, insomuch that the more righteous part of the people had nearly all become wicked. Yea, there were but few righteous men among them, and thus 6 years had not passed away since the more part of the people had turned from their righteousness like the dog to his vomit, or like the sow to her wallowing in the mire.
Yeah.
And then Jacob, this is where Jacob becomes the king of the secret combination. You just mentioned Jacob.
Jacob, there it is, yeah.
Okay. To place at their head whom they called Jacob. Their leaders did establish their laws. This is in verse 11. Everyone according to his tribe. Nevertheless, they were enemies, notwithstanding they were not a righteous people, yet they were united in the hatred of those who had entered into a covenant to destroy the government. They still...
The tribes are fighting against each other again.
Because the food trough of the government was basically shut down, and so they're not happy about that.
So Jacob and his bunch of tribes go to war with the tribes that are not against Jacob. Now, secret combinations. However, there's no Laconius this time. There's no Laconius, which means the people were about to be destroyed again, and there was no central government that was strong enough to repel these Jacobites, if you would.
There's tribalism.
Yep. So that's when the Lord steps in and says no more and destroys them all.
Yeah. Let's see. Then verse 14, it came to pass in the 31st year they were divided into tribes, every man according to his family, kindred, and friends. Nevertheless, they had come to an agreement that they would not go to war with one another, but they were not united in their laws and the manner of their government, but they were established according to the minds of those who were their chiefs and their leaders. Interesting they call them chiefs.
Chiefs. Mm-hmm.
Yeah, because what do the Native Americans call their
chiefs?
Leaders? Okay, yeah. But they did establish very strict laws that one tribe should not trespass against another, insomuch that in some degree they had peace in the land. Nevertheless, their hearts were turned from the Lord their God, and they did stone the prophets and did cast them out from among them.
Yep.
No prophets.
Nope.
Sick and tired of that stuff.
And at this point, there's no mention here in these couple of chapters right before the destruction. There's no mention of a church.
Yeah.
There's no mention of church at all. So that means that the people themselves came from within the church, went out of the church, or at least forgot what they were doing, and either joined the tribes and just lived their lives, and there was no church.
Yeah. Let's see here. Came to pass that Nephi, having been visited by angels and also the voice of the Lord, therefore having seen angels and being eyewitness and having had power given unto him that he might know concerning the ministry of Christ, and also being an eyewitness to their quick return from righteousness to wickedness and abominations, therefore being grieved for the hardness of their hearts and the blindness of their minds, went forth among them in the same year and began to testify boldly repentance and remission of their sins through faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. And he administered many things unto them, and all of them cannot be written. Part of them would not suffice, therefore they're not written in the book.
Yep.
And Nephi ministered with power and authority, and it angered the rulers. It says in verse 19, in the name of Christ did he cast out devils and unclean spirits, and even his brother did he raise from the dead. I mean, he was
huge miracles performed here.
He was amazing. After he'd been stoned and suffered death by the people. And the people saw it and did witness of it and were angry with him because of his power. Oh, man.
Yep.
And he did other miracles in the name of Christ. And the 30 and
in
first
the sight
year were
of
gone.
The people. That's
right.
The
so they actually
right
were
out in the open.
Miracles.
Yep.
And they still would refuse to believe it. Devils were cast out and so forth. And
remember, these people had, I mean, you take an average 30-year-old, 40-year-old, I mean, maybe 40-year-old might be old for the Nephites, maybe. 50
Yeah.
would be ancient. I don't know.
Probably 50 would be really old, probably
Right.
50, 60.
Well, let's say they're 30, 25. Even if they're 25 to 30 years old, they would have remembered the wars because they would have lived it. That only took place 10 years ago or less than that. They would have remembered the great covenants that were made. They would have probably joined in those covenants in the land of Mormon here. They would have seen before the wars basically a Nephite society that was level. Yet they just forsaked all of it. They forsaked all of it, and they didn't even believe Nephi, who was on his tower doing his thing before this.
A few years ago, but yeah. It's just amazing to me how when the light goes out, when the Spirit is no longer striving among the people, they are just blown like with every wind of change. I mean, it just they just go from wickedness, and the only reason why they go into righteousness is because it's less painful for a while, and then as soon as they get their pain to go away, then they basically went right back into wickedness. And it's just amazing to see this cycle just accelerate to the point where, I mean, almost every other year, they are going from good to bad, from good to bad.
Well, this also means that there's something within a human being that even if you see miracles, even if you witness them, even if you partake of them, even if you make covenants, society's pressure around you is so powerful that the natural man that's in all of us still will succumb to that dumb stuff, which means that's why we must follow the prophet of Jesus Christ on the earth today. There's nobody else authorized to give us information from God to be able to help us return back to him. There is nobody else. The authorization is in the church. The Book of Mormon is promoted by the church. This book that we're reading right here is promoted by only the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints.
And hated by most everyone else.
And hated by most everyone else.
But yet here we have this amazing history and so forth. It's no wonder that Abraham Lincoln saw so many amazing parallelisms in the Book of Mormon, what was going on in his day. And that was a long ways ago, as far as his time frame. Listen, folks, we've got to wrap this up. We're grateful to have it. I'm excited about what we just covered, but next week we're going to start into the destructions when Christ actually comes. And it's going to be really exciting. I hope you'll be able to join us. Listen, James, thank you for coming and sharing some of your
Thank you, Rod. I appreciate
knowledge
it.
and
This is
information.
not a coronavirus handshake. Look at that. It's a real one.
There, a double.
Yeah, a double.
All right. So, we were all checked no, just kidding. Okay, just kidding. Anyways, listen, folks, we want to thank you for being here, for being a part of this. I hope that this has been informative. We are not trying to scare the bejeebers out of people.
Nope.
We're trying to help you realize that by studying this book, it can help you prepare for the things that are definitely coming down. We are seeing more things now in this last few months than we've seen in the rest of my lifetime, I think, combined, as far as seeing these things coming down.
And it will continue to come down because the material written in the last days timeline, which is simply based on Scripture alone. I don't do dreams and visions. I do Scriptures alone.
Yeah.
And when you see the material come to pass, you'll know that it was written ahead of time. That was the point of me doing that. Because if we write it ahead of time and it comes to pass, at least in some semblance of fashion that's close to enough, then you can know where you are in the timeline and you can prepare ahead of time for the next event in the series.
That's right. And you can know that it's true. This is one of the reasons why Samuel Lamanite was such a powerful situation, because he predicted in advance. Who can know the future except God?
Right.
So if you can accurately predict the future, then you know that this is from God, and that's what we're kind of saying. Study the Scriptures, brothers and sisters. Learn of these things that are in the Book of Mormon and prepare ourselves and help to get your families and your neighbors and your friends and not necessarily just the people in the wards and so forth.
Why not tell everybody?
This is going to be
the Book of Mormon is for everybody anyway. The Book of Mormon was written for everybody.
That's right. That's right. So thank you, everybody. I hope that you've liked this, and we will see you next week to talk about the destructions that happened around the time of Christ. Take care, and remember to go to bookofmormonevidence.org to find the information, places to go. Come Follow Me 2020 on YouTube and so forth. And then also you can go and see
Last Days
James P. Prout's
Yep.
information there, and also on the Book of Mormon Evidence streaming site you can see some of his other presentations, which are hour-long presentations.
They're really awesome.
And they're awesome too. So there's a whole bunch of information. We hope that this will give you a new desire to really study these things out. Thanks, everybody. See you next week.
Bye for now.
We're excited to announce the 26th International Book of Mormon Evidence Conference, September 25th and 26th, with special guests Glenn Beck, Tim Ballard, and David Barton. And you can watch from any device. Tickets can be found at bookofmormonevidencestreaming.com. If you'd like to know more about lastdaystimeline.com, go to the website and you can see how his work digests whole prophecies to match the elements that are overlapping to form a clear timeline of the last days, including Daniel, Ezra, Nephi, Moroni, Jesus in 3rd Nephi, Isaiah, John, Joel, Ezekiel, Joseph Smith, and the modern prophets as well. You can also see one of the books, The President Makers, How Billionaires Control U.S. and Foreign Policy by Don Fotheringham on his website, as well as many other resources.